According to no less than Cathie Wood and Elon Musk, a major financial crisis is brewing. And the upshot to you is that you really better buckle in for what's going to come, and definitely do not buy a car until you watch this video. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So yeah, I was supposed to be going on vacation, but I'm leaving tomorrow, and I wanted to squeeze this in because this is a really, really important episode. Also, I'm going to try putting the microphone closer to my mouth. It's a big room that I'm in, and it's very echoey, so I'm going to try this and see if I can get a little bit cleaner signal to noise. So anyway, let me know what you think about that in the comments. I'll be gone for a week, but then I'll be back, and so I can try it again. Anyway, straight on to the crisis that is at hand. This is from Cathie Wood. This is only 2 hours ago as I'm reading this, and then Elon Musk responded to this. Anyway, Cathie Wood, and if you don't know, she's the head of ARK Invest, which is very much into disruptive technology and looking at the future and doing very careful research about a whole slew of different disruptive technologies, everything from genomics to, of course, EVs to artificial intelligence, etc., etc. Anyway, she said, ARK Invest has been concerned about, I assume, the impact of declining residual values on the $1+ trillion auto loan market. That's just in the US, by the way. Most of these loans back gas-powered vehicles. At Guy Dealership explains that the crisis is underway. The consumer preference shift towards EV will exacerbate this crisis. And then Elon responded to that about an hour and a half ago, potentially the biggest financial crisis ever. So like I said, buckle your seatbelts. This could be bigger than the 2008 financial crisis and recession. So before we get to Guy Dealership, let's take a look at this 2022 auto loan industry study on SuperMonkey. And again, I haven't vetted this exactly, but it is in line with what I know. And so it's pretty specific about this. And I just wanted to go through this and note how big of a market this auto loan market actually is. Anyway, if we move through this, we can see that the biggest takeaway is that the 2019-2020 year saw total consumer auto loan debt rise just $0.04 trillion, which is still a lot, from $1.33 trillion to $1.37 trillion. The total by the end of the second quarter of 2022, so that would be July 31st, August 1st, was $1.5 trillion, up $0.13 trillion in just 6 months. And that's a combination of, remember, of course, we had the pandemic, and then we had the chip shortage, and we had a huge undersupply of vehicles. And so the price of new and used cars completely skyrocketed. So that is a big reason why you see this gigantic uptick that happened. And then, of course, you see that total US vehicle sales were $15.5 million in 2021, up from $14.9 million in 2020. Interestingly enough, this is still a major decline since 2019. Before the pandemic, there was a lot more car sales before that in the US and globally. But anyway, you can see that there was an uptick. 2020 was a pretty bad year all around, and 2020 was a beginning of a recovery. But it's a little bit of a, what do they call that? The dead cat bounce. It's one of those things where it looks like a recovery, but it may not be as rosy as we think. Then we can see that the total number of loans held by Americans in the first quarter of 2022 was 4% above the low point of quarter one of 2020. So 80.2 million loans versus 77 million loans. And auto loan rates are rising, of course, because we're seeing interest rates rising overall, but they're still pretty low when compared to the rates of the 1980s. And then, of course, we have the combination of higher auto prices and interest rates have led to an increase in average monthly payments for auto loans across all credit tiers of 13% to 19% year over year. So that's a really big, that's almost rising by 1/5 in 1 year. And interestingly enough, we have historical highs for credit ratings for people. So 738 for new car purchasers and 675 for used car purchasers, which means that people are, getting up into those upper tiers of credit rating when they're purchasing cars. And then the average new auto loan, so that's not the cost of the car, but the loan itself is over $40,000. And then rather frighteningly, we see the year-over-year growth in averaged used auto loan amounts rose 18.66% in 2022, up from 12.58% in 2021 and 4.89% in 2020. So not just new cars, but used cars are starting to see a significantly larger loan amount taken out. And then the final point that I want to bring up from this report, the percentages of auto loans to less risky prime and near prime borrowers have grown, while riskier loans to lower credit score borrowers borrowers have shrunk. So this looks like a good thing, but it does set us up for the tweet thread that I want to explore right now. So again, as I said, this is a tweet thread from Guy Dealership or Car Dealership Guy, who is a car dealer. Guess what? And if you're not following him on Twitter, you should follow him on Twitter. And if you're not following me on Twitter, what the heck are you doing? You should be following me on Twitter. So anyway, follow both of us as soon as this video is done. Anyway, in a rather extended tweet thread, he begins with, "This morning I discovered something extremely alarming happening in the car market, specifically in auto lending. I'm now convinced that there is a massive wave of car repossessions coming in 2023. Here's what I discovered and what no one knows." And let's just flip back for a second to Cathie Wood and Elon Musk, right? Concerned about the impact of declining residual values and potentially the biggest financial crisis ever. So pay attention to this. Background: over the past 2 years, many people took out exorbitant loans on cars. Car values were inflated and frankly still are to some extent, but many people simply had no choice and bought an overpriced car. And again, we have the pandemic, the chip shortage, the supply shortage that artificially inflated the cost of cars. Continuing, well, and as people who have looked at the auto market recently, both new and used, you can see this, car valuations are now plummeting. Some cars have declined in value as much as 30% year over year. Holy crap. Our son had an accident last year and had to purchase a car at the height of used car prices, and his car is now worth a whole lot less than when he bought it for, and he's not a happy camper about that at all. So we know this firsthand, that these car valuations have crashed. They've really tumbled over the last year. Anyway, and these same people that took out these big loans are now underwater. Basically, they owe banks more on these cars than they are worth. And the banks are well aware of this. Of course they are. But there's no easy solution. You can't just put the genie back in the bottle. This brings me to what happened this morning. Every Friday, I conduct a team meeting to recap our week. This morning, one of our general managers opened up DealerTrack, a portal that dealers use to communicate with auto lenders, and highlighted something very concerning. 9 of our lending partners have started waiving open auto stipulations for consumers. Wait, what the heck does that even mean? Let me explain using a simple hypothetical scenario. 1. The dealer takes out an auto loan in 2020 or 2021 on an overvalued car. 2. 2022 comes around and that overvalued car is now rapidly declining in value. 3. With the car declining in value, consumer now owes more on that car than it's worth. 4. Consumer no longer wants the car. Maybe they outgrew it, maybe it keeps breaking, so the consumer wants to trade it in. 5. But the dealer can't trade the car in because the consumer owes way too much money on it. So the dealer asks the consumer for lots of money down to cover the difference in the valuation of both vehicles. 6. But of course the consumer doesn't have thousands of dollars to cover the difference between what they owe on the car and what it's worth. And here comes the perfect storm. 7. The dealer can't sell the consumer a car. The consumer can't buy a car. And you guessed it, the lender can't finance a car. Everybody loses. Oh no. So what happens next? Well, what happens next is what should give anybody who lived through the 2008 financial crisis the night sweats. The lender knows that most consumers are stuck in this situation and does the following. As I've highlighted, waives the open auto stipulation, meaning the lender lets the consumer buy the car knowing that they already have an open auto loan with another bank. Why the heck would they do this? Surely the lender knows that consumers that take on a second auto loan are much riskier and have much higher risk of default, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. Anyway, right? Yes, but the lender does it because they know that the consumer will default on the other car, dog eat dog style. So what they're banking on is that the new consumer has a car that they're underwater on that's a couple of years old that they don't want anymore, and they have this brand spanking new car that they do want. If it comes down to it, which car are they going to continue paying on? Well, of course, the new toy. They're going to let the old toy go. So they'll let the bank repossess that car, again, given that type of consumer. Obviously, if you want to protect your credit score, you're not going to do that, but there is a very large group of people who would be perfectly willing to let the old car become repossessed and not worry about it. So back to the tweet thread, Car Dealership Guy says, "Let me be clear, this is not normal, but it's the only way lenders can finance cars and dealers can put cars on the road, and the implications of this will be tons of repossessions. I've been a doubter, but after what I saw this morning, I'm now fully convinced that a wave of car repossessions will hit in early to mid 2023. If lenders are willing to backstab each other in order to put more loans on the road, we're in trouble. This will not end pretty." So again, let's think back to 2008 for just a moment. What caused the 2008 financial crash, or one of the very major causes for it, was subprime loans. That means that banks were willing to lend to people who did not have good credit scores on really, really goofy terms like jumbo loans and things like that. They lent these people money for these houses, and then the people en masse, because they couldn't afford these things, and they would get these jumbo loan payments that would suddenly show up. So their loan would go from $500 a month to $800 or $900 a month, just like that. And they didn't realize that. They would default on the houses. The houses would get repossessed. But what happens is when you have all these houses on the market at the same time, it massively depresses the value of these houses. So everything spiraled downward out of control. Now, admittedly, houses are on the order of 10 times more expensive than cars, right? A car might be $30,000 to $40,000 and a house might be $300,000 to $400,000 again, depending on where you live, but just an order of magnitude wise. But many, many fewer people own houses than own cars. Pretty much everybody who doesn't live in a major metropolitan area has to have at least one car for their family. So while a very large number of people rent their houses, pretty much everybody is either purchased or is purchasing, and as in paying for, a vehicle. So even though the vehicles are like 10 times less money, there's a lot more vehicles out there on the market than there are houses. And that means that these two things kind of balance with each other. And a lot of financial stability in terms of loaning money and all of that kind of stuff is based on giving out loans to consumers for houses, for cars, for other things, and then getting them to pay that back with interest. And if that begins to collapse, you're going to look at a serious, serious problem. And then we get to the part that Car Dealership Guy did not discuss, but is a super important aspect of this, and why I said you really need to pay attention to this video before you consider buying a car. That is that EV adoption is really taking off. I know the US has been a little delayed behind the rest of the world, but EVs are taking over the world. And so that means that internal combustion engine vehicles, which is still 94, I think, percent of the vehicle sales in the United States, it's rapidly declining, but it's still the vast majority of them. Those vehicles are not going to be worth as much money once people more and more and more want electric vehicles rather than gas cars. And of course, Cathie Wood pointed this out. But what this means is that we're looking at even more of a perfect storm. We've got lenders who are willing to backstab each other, which is going to put vehicles on the market, right? When you repossess a car, the bank gets nothing out of that car until they sell it to somebody else. So they don't just need to take it from the consumer who isn't paying anymore. They then need to sell this to another consumer and hopefully get a loan or something, but at the very least, sell it and get some money back out of it. But if these cars' values, if you have gas cars and the value is being depressed by the fact that people are allowing these cars to be repossessed and therefore flooding the market, and at the same time consumer preference is changing strongly towards electric vehicles rather than gas cars, you've got a double whammy. So these cars could not just decline 30% year over year, they could decline 50% plus year over year. And that means that if you're purchasing a new or even a relatively expensive used car right now, it's a dangerous, dangerous game that you're playing. And I will tell you from personal experience, my wife really, really wants to get a Bronco. And I have to say that I kind of put my foot down and said, you can't look at a new one. If you want to look at one, it's got to be one with, 60, 70,000 miles on it that's already taken a pretty significant value hit, so that if you purchase it, it won't lose that much more value. In other words, if you purchase the car for $50,000 right now, that's a really big risk. If you purchase it for $20,000 right now, the most you can lose is $20,000. So you can only lose 2/5 of what you had before. So, in my mind, the number one play is hold on to your car as long as you can, unless you can afford to buy an EV right now, because cheaper EVs will be coming out in the next few years, maybe from Tesla. I'm hoping that will happen. In fact, I did an episode yesterday where I hypothetically said that this hypothetical new factory in Mexico might be the one that will produce the less expensive cars for the Western Hemisphere. And then, of course, there will be Chinese and other brands that will be putting in less expensive EVs in the United States soon, and the rest of the world. Anyway, if you can't hold out for a vehicle for a couple of years, if you can't ride it out with the car you already have, so to speak, then what I highly recommend doing is purchasing a good value used car. Don't go crazy and try to buy the car of your dreams right now. This is a bad market for that. Buy, an inexpensive Toyota Camry that's been on the road for 100,000 miles or something and has lost a lot of its value already, it's still going to cost a reasonable amount right now, but at least you're going to compress the amount that you could potentially lose over time. So I highly, highly, highly recommend not purchasing a new gas car ever again. And if you have to purchase a car but can't afford a new EV, I highly recommend looking at an older used car, not an expensive new used car, but one that's been around for a while and is already reduced in price quite a bit. And as for the bigger financial impact of all of this, I, of course, am not a financial analyst, so don't listen to anything I say, but I'm starting to try to put a little bit of cash away. This seems like a situation where, you don't want to be completely leveraged out in anything, whether that's loans or the stock market or anything like that. So I'm putting more cash on hand than normal. I know that's a bad idea with inflation because it reduces in value, but at the same time, at least for my personal, relatively low risk profile, I appreciate having a little bit of cash on hand. So in case the worst happens, at least there's some money in the bank that we can go to if we need to. Anyway, I know this is all really scary and I'm actually kind of terrified for 2023 coming up right now. It already looked like with interest rates rising as drastically as they were and a lot of other things going on that we were going to be headed to a recession. But if we pile this auto loan debacle on top of that, things could get really, really ugly in 2023. So everybody buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a wild ride over the next 12 months or so. Hopefully we'll get through it okay and it won't be any big deal. But I, for one, again, as a risk-averse kind of person and kind of contracting what I'm thinking about spending in 2023. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode or kind of enjoyed this episode, at least found it provocative and thought-provoking and hopefully makes you think about what you might do over the next 12 months. Anyway, if you did, please do like the video so other people can find it and of course consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. I truly do appreciate it. What you all do for me is wonderful, and especially in these crazy times, I appreciate the financial support, but also the emotional and social support of having this nice community around me. So thank you all so much. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have Tesla Bot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.